Chapter 1. England, 16th of March, 1322. "Loose!" Robin roared, hoping the soldiers he commanded would be able to hear him over the deafening sounds of the battle. His men, 15 in total, released their arrows, along with dozens of other longbowmen in Thomas Plantagenet, the Earl of Lancaster's army. The missiles formed an ominous dark mass in the sky before hammering down into the forces of King Edward II, led by Sir Andrew Harclay, 1st Earl of Carlisle. The king's men desperately tried to shelter behind their shields, but many of them were killed or horribly injured. Their commanders screamed at those still standing to hold firm as the rebel forces advanced upon them. Robin shuddered at the screams of dying men, the thunder of horses' hoofs, and the looks of terror on the faces of the men being driven on by the mounted nobles behind them. He had never seen anything as horrifying as a full-scale battle before, and the hellish atmosphere shocked him. He forced himself to concentrate, fitting another arrow to his bow and bellowing again, "Keep shooting! We have to allow the Earl's men a chance to reach the ford, or we're finished here." It was true. The Earl of Lancaster's forces were badly outnumbered by the king's men. Sir Andrew had also managed to reach the river before the rebels, which had allowed him to take full advantage of the surrounding terrain. Positioning his knights and men-at-arms on the opposite end of the bridge, almost in a spear wall, Harclay knew the Earl would have to try and break through, as more of the king's forces were travelling to attack his rear. It was becoming more and more obvious to Robin the battle was going badly. Lancaster was trying to lead his men, many of them wearing his livery of argent and azure, to a ford further upriver, while his lieutenants, the Earl of Hereford, Humphrey de Bohun, and Roger de Clifford of Skipton, tried to storm the bridge. The king's longbow men were taking a terrible toll on Lancaster's men as they tried to reach the ford, though, while Hereford had been killed by a pikeman hiding underneath the bridge. When Clifford was also wounded, the assault on the bridge threatened to grind to a complete standstill. Robin and his men had been living as outlaws in the forests of Barnesdale a few months earlier, when the Earl of Lancaster had promised them all pardons if they joined his rebellion. It had been a simple choice for the outlaws. They could either continue to live like animals in the freezing winter, hunted by the foresters and sheriff's soldiers, or join a rebellion against the king, whose unjust laws had driven them into the greenwood in the first place. The weeks leading up to this point had been hectic for the outlaws, as the Earl sent word summoning them to join his army besieging the royal stronghold of Tickhill Castle. From there the army had moved on to Burton-on-Trent, setting fire to the town when they found out the king was coming after them, before heading for Dustonborough on the coast. They'd only managed a few miles before Harclay's men had caught up with them here at Boroughbridge. For most of Robin's men, this wasn't the first time they'd been a part of such a large, organised force. Many of them had stood against the Scots, or, like Will Scarlet, served as mercenaries, fighting in battles all across the world. In the past, though, they had joined up because they were either summoned to do so by their local lord, or were being well paid to fight for an employer. Here, Robin and his friends felt like they were fighting for a cause that directly impacted on their own personal lives. Although none of them knew much about the wider political picture in England, they knew they wanted their freedom, and the Earl of Lancaster promised that. It was widely known that the Earl stood up for the lower classes living in his manors, while King Edward II spent more time playing around in boats or at sports than he did taking care of his people.